Two new books explore some fascinating history about St. Louis. That's next on City Corner. I'm Steve Potter, and welcome to City Corner. Two new books from Reedy Press explore some fascinating things about the St. Louis community you may or may not know about. Coming up later in the program, we're going to talk to Don Corrigan about his new book about Webster Groves. But first, welcome Patrick Murphy.
Thank you, Steve. This is really fun to be here.
I've known you for years.
Long
I don't think
time.
I've ever sat on a set with you before.
Yeah, through radio and TV stuff, yeah.
Well, speaking of TV, for people that might say, hey, that Patrick seems familiar. Most people know you from PBS, Channel 9 in St. Louis, and just tell me a little bit about your history with them.
Oh, I did voice work for Channel 9, and I produced documentaries, and I'm still doing work with them, though I've officially retired about 5 years ago. And
I know I hear your voice every time I tune in.
I'm the guy who says, Wednesday at 8. You're watching the 9 Network. So it's been a wonderful association for like more than 40 years.
Wow.
And I still do work with them and have many friends down there. And
of course, for years I was with St. Louis Public Radio, and we were neighbors.
That's right, right across the alley.
I don't think I ever saw you in the parking lot or anything.
No, I was inside working hard.
I was in the parking lot. Patrick, the reason you're here today, though, is a new book that you have out called Irish in St. Louis. So I'm just assuming that you have Irish roots?
Yes. The Murphys on our side are all Irish.
Was it the old Murphys originally?
They're all Irish, yes. Grew up Irish and, in an Irish household and heard lots of stories from the old Irish guys and was always kind of fascinated with this idea. So what is this Irish thing anyway? When I was 5 years old, I went down to the famous bar downtown and sat on Santa Claus's lap. This is a true story. And he asked me my name, and I said, Patrick Murphy. He said, that's a fine Irish name. And I thought if a celebrity like Santa Claus was into this Irish thing, it must be something worth looking into.
So was that the basis of how you started on this book? Was it just your family history? And
I wrote a book last year also for Reedy Press called Candyman, which is the history of Switzer's licorice. And it's two Irish families. The Switzers, which is actually Irish, although it sounds German.
That was like down on the landing, wasn't it?
Yeah, down by the East Bridge. My father, grandfather, and great-grandfather all worked at Switzer's licorice, all the way back to Ireland. And so that was an Irish Kerry patch story. And after Candyman came out, our publisher, Josh Stevens, suggested that I write something on the Irish in St. Louis. And it's a coffee table book. It's got about 200 photographs in it, many of which I've never seen. And it sort of takes the Irish story all the way from Ireland. Why would you want to leave a lovely country like Ireland anyway? Famines, the British.
The potato famine, right?
Yeah. And Ireland was occupied for 800 years by the English, and it was practically illegal to be Irish in Ireland. And one of the cities that people came to in America was St. Louis for a lot of reasons.
I have a connection with that I want to talk to you about in a minute, but why don't we just jump in and take a look at an image from your book, Irish in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And here we go.
That is the Celtic cross that was put up at the early 20th century toward Irish nationalism. It's a Calvary cemetery, and there are also Irish patriots who were killed in the Easter Rebellion, the Easter Uprising, buried there. And the Hibernians, every year, every Easter, it's a celebration of like the resurrection of Jesus and also the uprising in Ireland. And they march there and they sing songs and they read the names of the Irish patriots and demand that Ireland be united again.
Let's look at another image.
That's the acknowledgement page, all the wonderful people who helped me write the book.
What's the...
That's just a pretty little bridge somewhere in Ireland.
Let's look at another image.
Yeah. Oh, that's the...
Who are these folks?
That is a slave market, the Lynch slave market. And one of the interesting issues that I learned writing the book is that a lot of the Irish who came over to St. Louis actually owned slaves. And as an immigrant group, they were very split on the issue of slavery and very split on which side of the Civil War they joined. There were one battle outside of St. Louis at a place called Wilson's Creek, where it was Irish on both sides fighting each other.
Yeah, I've read that.
Yeah.
That must have been odd. So like you could be on the other side from your uncle or something.
Yeah, I mean, it was very divided for a lot of reasons. The Catholic Church took no moral stance on the issue of slavery back then. And a lot of the Irish, they were just so low on the social scale that they didn't like the idea, honestly, going back. I mean, as politically incorrect as it is, they felt comfortable having a group of people underneath them, enslaved people. So they were not.
I have to throw this in there because I can totally understand what you're saying, only because on my mother's side, I'm 100% German, and her family came here in the 1840s.
Yeah.
But my grandmother used to talk about Irish people because they were both immigrants in St. Louis at the same time.
Yeah.
And even though my family were German business owners, they were kind of discriminated against and looked down on.
Yeah.
And the Irish had the same thing, and I even picked up on from my grandmother. She's no longer with us, so I can say it. She was a little snobby, like, the Irish.
I know. I absolutely. In fact, there were, and it's in the book, there were pseudo-scientific racial theories in the 19th century that although the Irish looked white, somehow it was white with an asterisk. It wasn't like the real white people were like Germans or English, and then they sort of descended there. Somewhere in the middle were Irish, white technically, but not really. And there was this crazy pseudo-scientific racial theory. There was this whole network of discrimination and, but they got out of it and we have assimilated. And now everybody wants to be Irish one day out of the year. And there are 2 St. Patrick's Day parades in St. Louis.
Right, see, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, 2 of them. One in Dogtown, the Hibernian one, and one downtown. So we've got 2 parades, and only 100 and something years ago, we were despised. All lived in Kerry Patch and Dogtown. And,
right.
There were signs in shop windows that said Irish need not apply.
But see, the Germans went through the same thing in a different way.
And they had the disadvantage of not speaking English. So, I mean, the Irish attitude was things were so bad in Ireland, like where it was illegal to be Irish in Ireland, that, hey, over here in America, it's like, all you got is discrimination. We can handle that. We'll build our own hospital. We'll start our own schools. We'll build our own churches.
Let's look at a few more images from Patrick's book, Irish in St. Louis.
I believe that is a picture of a bunch of Fenians invading Canada in 1867. I love the Irish. The Irish are wonderful. Their plan was to invade Canada, hold Canada hostage for freeing Ireland, for giving independence to Ireland. And like every other uprising, it failed. In fact, the only adjective that goes with Irish uprising is failed. A failed Irish uprising.
Let's keep looking at images from your book. And you can
Oscar
comment.
Wilde.
Well, yeah, there you go.
He came to St. Louis, and the St. Louis Irish totally did not get the guy. They totally did not understand.
Everyone else did.
St. Louis was kind of, he was talking about beauty and aesthetics and philosophy, and like the Irish had not quite caught up with him. They were just still trying to make a living hauling bricks and trying to find work.
Let's go to the next one.
Kerry Patch, that's 13th Street.
Kerry Patch was a very particular geographical.
It was on the north side, north of the Eads Bridge. At one time, all the way out to Jefferson, but Cass, Biddle, Melanthie, those streets down to about 6th Street up to about Jefferson. Just a really squalid place.
Because this is when my German family, they would have been around Soulard at the same time, and the Germans stayed in their place, and the Irish stayed in their place.
My grandfather and his brother grew up in Kerry Patch, and they used to tell us as kids that it was really dangerous to go out of the neighborhood.
Wow.
Like Polish kids lived to the north, German kids lived to the south. You didn't get out of your neighborhood.
Wow. Let's look at some more.
That is my favorite picture out of the book, I think. What's more Irish than a cop, a priest, a nun, and a bunch of leprechauns in the back? That, to me, that is St. Louis Irish, that picture.
There you go. Let's keep going.
Oh, yeah. Camp Jackson, when the Union troops surrounded Camp Jackson.
And where is Camp Jackson?
Now it's where St. Louis University is. But there was a pro-Southern Army garrison down there. The Union Army surrounded it, marched them down to the arsenal as prisoners. A crowd started throwing rocks at them. They turned their guns on the crowd, killed a bunch of people, and a very high percentage of them were Irish, which also prejudiced a lot of the Irish against the Union and encouraged many of them to join the Confederacy, where they learned how to shoot and do military maneuvers, which they brought back to Ireland later to fight the English.
Irish in St. Louis is the book, and who are these?
Those are the Sisters of Mercy, who started what we know now as Mercy Hospital. Yeah, gotta have a few pictures of nuns in a book of Irish St. Louis.
Well, nuns they're familiar with St. Louis, that's for sure.
Yeah, and
they've been around a long time.
If you want to get something done, seriously, call a nun.
What's this?
St. Patrick himself.
Oh.
And that picture is great because it looks just like him. That's Father Dunn and his newsboys. In fact, there was a Pat O'Brien movie in the late 1940s called Fightin' Father Dunn and His Newsboys. And he started basically an orphanage for poor newsboys at the turn of the century. And it became, very famous. There
Is that
they
more
are
of them?
eating their annual Thanksgiving dinner. So, there was a lot of charity because back then there was no social network. The Germans took care of themselves, the Irish took care of themselves, the Italians took care of themselves. There was no social network. So every group pretty much took care of
Let's look at
itself.
one more image before we're out of time. Well, in fact, we won't do that. I'll just ask you a question.
Okay.
What is it about potatoes and the Irish? It's like,
Well, it's become kind of a stereotype. But originally, there was so little food and so much poverty in Ireland that the potato, which was actually started out as kind of a delicacy from like South America, they introduced it because it could be grown in large numbers in a small plot of land, and it became the main staple crop. So when the famine hit it, everything died, and there was no food in Ireland at all.
well, Patrick, I want to thank you. Please tell all your Irish friends hello.
I will, and I really appreciate coming on the show. It's been fun, and it's been great seeing you again, too.
I haven't seen you for years, and we will hear your voice on PBS Channel 9.
I hope so.
In the days and years to come. Patrick Murphy, Irish in St. Louis is the name of the book from Reedy Press, available at all bookstores. And Don Corrigan is on next to talk about Webster Groves. Are there any Irish people in Webster?
They're everywhere. They're
Okay,
everywhere.
I'll ask Don. All right, thank you, Patrick Murphy. Appreciate that. And we'll be back with more of City Corner after this.
The Missouri Botanical Garden is loved by green thumbs and non-gardening types alike because you can play. You can relax. And there's always something new to experience, no matter the time of day or the season. And learn about conservation and one-of-a-kind plants. So come and experience St. Louis.
Operation Wonder Park is a go!
There's nothing more powerful than imagination. But don't just imagine. Use STEM to change the world.
Who's with me?
It's gonna hurt tomorrow.
If she can STEM, so can you. Find out more at She Can STEM.
The Missouri Botanical Garden is loved by green thumbs and non-gardening types alike because you can play. You can relax. And there's always something new to experience, no matter the time of day or the season. And learn about conservation and one-of-a-kind plants. So come and experience St. Louis.
It's so sad. It's not.
If you smoked, this new lung cancer screening could save your life. Visit SaveByTheScan.org.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes, and you can do it here. So what are you waiting for? Just go to the site.
I'm Steve Potter. Welcome back to City Corner, and we continue our conversation about interesting facets, communities in St. Louis. Don Corrigan is our guest now. He has a new book that's just about to come out, Amazing Webster Groves. Hi, Don.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Well, you have a hard act to follow.
Oh, do I know that?
Patrick Murphy was just on, and we were talking about his book, Irish in St. Louis. So what's the Irish connection to Webster Groves? Is there one?
Well, there's a famous guy named Patrick Murphy that lives in Webster Groves. He keeps leaving, and then he always comes back. So he's consistent in Webster Groves. But then we also have Kevin Murphy, who's the famous writer and columnist for the Webster Kirkwood Times, which I've been involved in.
Yeah, just back up. Give us a little bio of yourself. You were involved with Webster University and then the newspaper. So give us a little history.
Well, I've always been a journalist. I worked all over Illinois and worked at the Bloomington Pantograph and then the Lockport Free Press near Lewis University. Got an offer to come to Webster University, so that began a long tenure. As soon as I came to Webster University, I ran into some Webster students who were older and they wanted to start a newspaper, the Webster Kirkwood Times. Of all places, we met at Belcher Typewriter in Webster Groves. You remember those things?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, we said, so let's go with a newspaper. Let's start it. So started as the Webster Times, then became the Webster Kirkwood Times. Then we branched out to start two newspapers, South County Times, West End Word. Unfortunately, COVID and the lockdown put a dent in the newspaper operation. So I became emeritus editor after selling out to an employee group with my partner, Dwight Bittekoffer. And so that gave me some time. So I said, well, I've got 40 years of history and interviewing people in Webster Groves. I should use this to write a book.
Well, I have fond memories of Webster because I had an aunt and uncle that lived there, not far from my grandmother's house, which was a little north of there. But what do you think is special about Webster Groves?
Well, I know it's cliche, but it's the people. And they are so involved and so active in politics, the arts, activism. It's an amazing place to be as a reporter because there's so many distinguished people that have made their mark. I think that's part of what makes Webster Groves, but it also has a long history. It claims to be, the longest running suburb in St. Louis, the first suburb, the queen of the suburbs. But it naturally gets a good fight from Kirkwood, which is next door.
Now, in the old days, didn't you take the train from downtown St. Louis to like Kirkwood and Webster?
You took it from St. Louis to Webster and Kirkwood.
Right.
But for a while, Kirkwood was able to talk the railroad into skipping Webster. And people actually had to go to Kirkwood and then take a horse carriage back to Webster.
Wow.
So the animosity began early between those two cities.
Amazing Webster Groves is the name of your book. Let's take a look at a couple of images from your book, and you can explain what we're looking at.
Well, those are some of the mascots that you find, and Webster Groves has the markers at Naricks. Then you go down, Lockwood a little further, and you run into the Webster Gorlock. And I can talk a little bit about that particular mascot. And then from there you go to the Statesman for Webster Groves High School. And of course they are always in competition with the Pioneers in Kirkwood, especially at Turkey Day time. I'm amused by the Gorlock because it started off as a contest and they came up with this guy that looked a little bit like a bull. But at that time he also had a pesticide can and a mustache. And then when they got ladies teams at Webster, they had to sort of degender him, get rid of the mustache, and then they thought environmentally the pesticide can was probably not a good idea.
When we think about the image of Webster Groves, I think people generally think of it as a fairly affluent kind of community. Did it start as a fancy place or not?
I think it started as a church-going place and an intellectual center, and it always has been. There was the Webster Groves School for Boys, started by Artemus Bullard, and there's always been a debate of whether the town got its name from that. The railroad town aspect, Artemus Bullard and a whole collection of people were killed in the famous bridge accident on one of the first runs to Jeff City.
Right, I know about that. Yeah.
Yes, and so that was the school fell apart after that. But the Webster name kind of stuck with the Webster stop. When I working for Webster University, I go to their European campuses occasionally, and everybody always goes, Webster University, Webster Groves. Was that named for the dictionary? And I'd have to sit. I don't think I'm going to discourage them from that.
I never thought of that. Yeah. Let's look at some more images from your book, Amazing Webster Groves.
Well, that's the Community Days, which is the spirited July 4th Independence Day. They consider that the most important Independence Day celebration in America. And the reason Baton Bob's up there in the headline is because he caused a controversy one year because he was uninvited, but he made his way into the parade. And I don't know if you remember Baton Bob.
I used to see him.
Yes.
Everybody does. Let's look at the next image here.
So when I came to Webster Groves to work at Webster University, I'm originally from St. Louis, across the river like you. I was in Belleville. And all these TV stars, like Charlotte Peters.
Right, she had the kids show for years.
Yes, Texas Bruce. They had the cartoon show, Cliff St. James.
Let's look at the next image, because there's one celebrity that, and that's the one that even as a little kid, I always thought, I'm near where Phyllis Diller lives.
Yes. And one of the joys of doing the newspaper was to be able to get a chance to interview all these people like Charlotte Peters and of course, Phyllis Diller.
What was she like?
Such a kick. She's just like you would think she was. I mean, she's just a cut-up all the time. Although the neighbors told me that she was a pretty sophisticated lady. I never got to meet Fang, though, her husband Fang, who she beat up on all the time.
I had a lot of vinyl comedy albums of hers. That's how far back it goes. What's this?
Well, you know why she baked cupcakes one at a time?
I can't remember.
Because her oven is so dirty. So she's... Yes, this is Marilyn Bradley.
It was Fang's fault. I've had Marilyn Bradley has been a guest on the show in years gone by.
Yeah, and she's a Webster resident, Webster artist. I do a chapter on artists, brainy people.
And she's still very active, isn't she?
Yes, and she's in that chapter among with a number of other artists like Bob Stackey or Charlotte Peters' son, Mike Peters, the Pulitzer Prize winner. Mm-hmm. Mary Englebright's in that chapter. She was right down the street from the newspaper, and we'd go visit her and see what her latest work. The Cherub Bolies is one of her most famous.
I had the honor of interviewing her one time. What's this?
Well, this is a shot from way back. I do a chapter on the statesmen, and by that I mean politicians and people in government in Webster Groves. This was the chief of police, McDonnell, and he was... Webster's had a lot of distinguished chiefs of police, but he was interesting because he had the Saturday morning court for the kids. And he told the kids, you guys got to stop stealing signs. You are stealing street signs, you're stealing, and this costs money, and I'll give you till Saturday to bring them all back. So this is a photo of how successful he was in getting the kids to come and surrender their signs.
Before we look at more images, one thing I want to ask you about, I was looking through some notes about your book and stuff, and one thing I didn't realize about Webster Groves, back when I was like in high school and stuff in the 70s, remember all the hippie stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Evidently, Webster Groves was kind of the center of the hippie scene around here. What's that all about?
Well, you have two business areas. You have Old Webster on the west end, and then you have the Old Orchard. And the Old Orchard part of the business community turned into sort of the hippie place. So that's where you could buy your zigzags and your paraphernalia and your water beds. And at Halloween, they had a special water bed raffle.
Don't forget the incense.
Huh?
Don't forget the
the
incense.
incense. Yeah. And I heard people bought a lot of their water pipes and papers there too.
I never just associated that with Webster Groves before. Let's take a look at some more images.
Okay, this is that famous barber, Lee Moss, from North Webster. I do a whole chapter on North Webster history. Why is he famous? He's famous because, well, you know, in the black community, the barbershop is often the center of everything. It's where everybody talks politics. He's had everybody there. You know, when the politicians, whether it's Barack Obama or George W. Bush, or they always sent their staffers there to get their haircuts and find out what's going on politically in St. Louis.
Is he still around?
He's still around. He also has all this memorabilia from when Cassius Clay came into town before he became Muhammad Ali.
Let's see if we have time for take a look at one more. Okay, that's going back in history a little bit.
Right, and I mentioned that it's a church-going community, and 4 churches got their start at the same time, and this is the Baptist Church in North Webster. That's one of the things that makes, you know, they say the unexamined life is not worth living. I think the unexamined city is not worth living in. And that's what makes Webster Groves so unique, because there's quite a few histories of Webster that came before me, including the history of North Webster. This is Governor Donnelly's home in Webster Groves, and a lot of people don't know that Webster Groves had both a senator and a governor.
I didn't know that.
And that's Donnelly. And what's fascinating about him is he squeaked in when he was elected, and there was they wouldn't seat him. The Democrats wouldn't seat the Republican. They said it was a stolen election.
Well, any predictions? You're looking back on the history of Webster Groves. We're out of time, but any predictions for Webster's future?
Well, Webster is always full of controversy. Some of them are big, some of them are small. I predict that it will continue, but that's democracy. It's a very politically active town. All you got to do is look at the Webster Kirkwood Times. Every time there's an election or a referendum on a new development in town, people get, and that's what makes it fun to be a journalist and a writer about Webster Groves, because there is so much of that kind of activity.
The name of a book is Amazing Webster Groves. It actually hasn't come out yet, but like any day, right?
They're saying April 30th, so.
Amazing Webster Groves, available at all bookstores and also some Schnook stores, or you can go to reedypress.com. Don Corrigan is the author, and we know him from years as being a journalist, and keep up the good work.
Well, thanks, Steve.
Don, great seeing you again.
Yes, take care now.
Right, that wraps up this edition of City Corner. Thanks for watching. Join us next time. Bye.